Awesome. Well, welcome, Greg. It's really nice to
You.
have you here. Um,
Happy to be here.
so I like to kind of start with some softballs, and then kind of track back a little bit. One I like to start with is, and this will be very interesting for me, anyways. Who is your favorite athlete?
Ah, So, in terms of uber athlete crossing all sports, Wayne Gretzky, because
Really?
he changed his sport. It's a sport now again of sort of a lot of thugs and tough guys and stuff. And he never took a hit, never made a hit. He had this idea that, if you could figure out where the puck is going, that's what was important, not going to where it is. And he changed the rhythm of the game, made it incredible. So he was a thinking man's athlete. So,
Oh,
so he is my
that's
favorite athlete in terms of in rowing. It's got to be Emma Twigg, who was contemporary for a while of my daughter's, but who has been to five Olympics and for her second and third Olympics was fourth, which is a very hard place to be, and off the podium. And yet she came back in Tokyo to win a gold medal, and then gamely, and because she's paid, went to Paris and got a silver. So
wow.
she's very cool.
So if you look back kind of over your career, broadly defined, what do you suppose you're most proud of?
Well, I'd say as I look back, I sort of cross career with life and everything else, and I found a career path that allowed me to do a lot of fun stuff, like be a good father and coach, 17 seasons of youth hockey. Um, it allowed me to have a sort of a short attention span by switching careers a couple of times and by investing in a lot of little companies, which allows you to move around. I'm proud of the fact that I'd say every company purposefully, had a reason to give back to the community in one way or the other, mostly in healthcare.
Mhm.
So uh, I'm sort of proud of those accomplishments.
Yeah. What do you suppose kind of one of the things we focused on with students is like trying to identify their own strengths and weaknesses, kind of a self evaluation. What do you suppose your strengths and weaknesses are, and how that played out in your career?
Well, I have no idea what I thought my strengths and weaknesses were when I was a sophomore in college. What I learned, I think, over time is I am not a great judge of character in the short term. I mean, I can figure it after a while, but I have been partners with and invest with people that really didn't have enough character to be a good partner. So in part that means you lose money, but in part means you're not doing the stuff you want to do. I've tried hard now to make up for it by making sure that when I invest, you really have to know your partner. When I invest, I find people who I do know and trust, who know them, or I introduce them to them. And I try to put these potential partners through a little stress. So I don't do it on a luncheon, but try to do it in some other way. So I say that is my largest weakness. And then when I started out, I had no quantitative experience. And I was talking to John today, said no matter how much you like history or government, other things, get some quantitative skills because you really can't go very far in business or even in law or in medicine without being able to understand data. So statistics, great thing to take. Should have the basics of reasonably decent level math. Let's see. On the strong side, I think I'm pretty good with interpersonal skills. People generally like me, and that has been really helpful for selling ideas and getting consensus around a table, and frankly, getting opportunities. Um, you know, met a guy and we got along, and I went sailing with him, and then he invites me to be on the board of his company, which grows and goes public, and so sort of a freebie. Maybe I did a good job on the board, but it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't, cheerful as well.
What's the most fun you've had in your career?
I think all the fun has got to do with sort of building companies. So one reason I left the law is you don't really get to be a true participant. You're just keeping people out of trouble. And what I loved is starting up companies. So I was an early employee to a firm called Pell Rudman, which became quite a successful investment manager, venture operation. It was awesome when we had 6 employees, figuring out how to get to 12, figuring out how to bring new people in, seeing what services we had to offer. And then when I was chairman of a company called PHT, that was a workout. But when I took over, it was in fairly tough shape, but it was just great to be building something. You probably had the same thing, but I, you know, I can't, everybody's different, but I wouldn't go and work for a big company when you have a chance of being in a startup.
Yeah, I haven't had a boss since I was 32, so it would be
Exactly.
hard for me. So let's start all the way back. Let's go all the way back now. So I wanted to talk about your dad a little bit. Tell me about your dad's athletic career. I read somewhere that he set a world record.
Well, so he was a war guy and wrote his freshman year and then went to war and came back in the force programs in 46, 47, where everybody's back living in Quonset huts and getting over their malaria and their PSD. And he rejoined the Harvard crew and he was captain in 1947. And the 47 Harvard crew set the 2,000-meter world record. In those days, 2,000-meter was only raced at the Olympics and occasionally, but he set the world record for 2,000 meters on Lake Washington in an intercollegiate regatta, which was 5:47, and it stood for quite a while. Now, some might argue that the course was short, but it doesn't matter. It was official, and he lived on that for a long time.
So tell me about his professional career. What did he do for work?
So he went to New York and thought Boston was a dead town, which it really was at this time. Went to New York and went into the shipping business and got to know people because he also was socially capable and ended up being on a number of boards, some fairly big boards. And um, through early friendships, I think a couple stemming from his days at Harvard in those post-war era, he got to know Tom Perkins, who founded Kleiner Perkins, and Tommy Davis, who started Mayfield. And so he was an early investor in those funds. And they were the early Silicon Valley funds that did extremely well. So,
Yeah, just for the students' benefit, Kleiner Perkins was probably the most successful of the first handful of venture capital firms, in the country, in the world, frankly. Um, so what was tell me about your dad, affiliation with Harvard?
he was like a Mr. Harvard, and started by writing letters for money, and became a alumni representative, and ultimately, shortly after I left the school, I went on the corporation, and at Harvard, in those days, the corporation of the president and 6 other fellows ran all the business aspects of Harvard and would meet once every 2 weeks or a day and responsible for the budget, revenues, expenses, et cetera. And in those days, the corporation was not involved in any programmatic work. That was all the overseers, which is a larger body of elected people. And he was on the corporation for many years.
Yeah, 27, I read. And also, I think was maybe followed by Jamie Houghton, who's my old business partner's dad. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. And yeah, he and Jamie and Emil Houghton, they were friends also from their collegiate days. Jamie was a little bit younger.
yeah. So when did you start rowing?
Well, I started in a dinghy at the age of 2 and then went to a summer camp, which had shells. So I rode there coincidentally with a guy named Gene Clapp, who got a silver medal in 1972, and a guy named Nordy Nordstrom, who was on a couple of very good Northeastern crews. But then I forgot about it and played, as I said to John, I played lacrosse and football and hockey. at high school until I hurt my knee, and the only thing I could do was row. And then my junior year, I started rowing again at high school and rowed through college and beyond.
What? Tell me about the nickname of your collegiate crew, which, I think arguably is one of the best collegiate crews ever assembled. What Rude and Smooth they were called. Why?
Well, we were given that by, in those days, Sports Illustrated, which was a magazine. It isn't anymore, I guess. Uh, Covered rowing. So I did an article once or twice a year, and the guy covering it sort of liked the fact that a number of our crew were frankly rude. We had a guy named Al Sheely who was a very good oarsman, but a bit of an asshole, and used to say "so long, suckers" at the 500-meter mark as we pulled away, and other things. And so that's where the rude side came. But the smooth side was that we were pretty good and pretty slick crew, and so it was a moniker that was easy to hold on to. It was a
So
great
you
period.
were you were national champions twice?
So Harvard was national champions in 4 and 5, and then again in 6 when I wasn't. Most of us had graduated.
Okay. But you were there in 74 and 75.
I was there in 74 and 75, and because I
Yeah.
timed things right, I made it through 4 years of collegiate rowing without losing a race. So,
Yeah. Not bad.
yeah.
And so what did you were still rowing in 1980?
So I went from rowing at Harvard to trying out for the 76 Olympic team in the sculling boats in quad, actually. And that didn't work out for me. So I went to law school and took up sculling in the single and represented the US in the single in 78, 77, 8, and 9, and would have been the 80 representative to Moscow, but Olympics were canceled. So that was
So
that.
what was your reaction to the Jimmy Carter boycott, given the fact you would have been the single sculler?
Well, on the I actually supported what he did, even though it meant no Olympics for me, because it was done because Russia had invaded Afghanistan, and we would be providing, by going, we were providing a true Olympics and blessing what Russia did. And the parallels were close enough to 1936 when the U.S. team went to Berlin, and although many people in this side of the water claim that was the right thing to do because Jesse Owens won races and the Washington crew won the 8. In fact, Germany did most of the winning and used it as a huge publicity boost to justify their regime. So it really wasn't, I think, a great idea. So I didn't mind not going in that sense. And rowing had been so good to me. I'd had all these great races. I'd been around the world and raced in world championships all over and met my future wife. So I didn't really have as many complaints. And I was already a lawyer. I had other things to do.
So before we move on from your rowing career, so what was your like best race? What was the race you remember the most clearly?
Well, I ran a lot. I did a lot of racing, but I was in the Olympic trials in 76 in the single. I was somewhere in the C or D final. In other words, guys, in the 20s, not heard of. And
And one guy's going. One guy is going.
and only one guy's going. And and then I kept training when I was at law school and had some very good workouts, got some speed, and like 3 weeks before the trials for the World Championships for 77, 2 weeks, I just realized that I was just looking at the stopwatch, looking at things. I was going fast enough to win if I didn't blow it. And so that was all about strategy of not letting my main competitor, a guy named Jim Dietz, is a lifelong friend, know that I had that kind of speed. So through the regatta, I sort of dogged it and barely won my heat, second in the semifinal, so that I could open it up. And I let Dietz lead for 1,200 meters before I opened it up because I felt if he knew he was in a race, he was strong enough, he could probably beat me. But if he didn't know he was in a race, he could be shocked, which is what happened. So he actually didn't even finish the race. It went by him and he stopped three strokes before the end of the race. Totally
Really?
dumb.
Just a small coincidence. So he went on. I think it's the same Jim Dietz went on to coach at Coast Guard, right?
Yes, absolutely. And then
Yeah.
you know,
So I famously was in the first Wesleyan boat after losing to Jim Dietz for I think 16 years in a row. We finally beat him, and he was incredibly gracious about it. Because it was a big deal for us. Um, okay, so you went to law school, and then you practiced law for a while. What happened after law school professionally?
so after law school, I went to a smallish firm in Boston, about 30 lawyers, called Hemingway and Barnes, because I didn't have a clue of what I actually wanted to do in the law. And they had an old-fashioned program where you could litigate and then move to family law and then move to corporate law and sort of test different fields. And I soon found out I didn't want to be a litigator, way too much paperwork, and I'm not enough of a showman. And ended up helping small companies with their securities law and whatnot, which was great. I was there for 6 years, but I realized it was more fun on the company side than the lawyer side. And so you'd be sitting somewhere in a conference room in New York or Boston and ironing out a deal. And then the principals would agree, shake hands, and go out and have a great dinner. And me, the lowly associate, and the other associates would go and write stupid documents all night that were way excessive. And I just thought this isn't effective use of my time. I want to be on the other side of the table. So then I
So how did you
started.
make that transition from being a lawyer to being a principal?
Well, so I started. Well, I first went to a guy named Dick Testa, who was the lawyer in town for venture capital and startups. He had done Deck and all these famous companies, and and he took me out to lunch, and I said I want to do more venture capital. Maybe I should join your firm. And he goes, no, no, don't join my firm. He says, join a company, and I'll be your lawyer. So then I just went around to different startups and finally found one that would take me on doing something that I'd never done before, which is invest. So that was Phil Rudman, and that turned out to be a great experience. One, because the culture of the firm was great. The founders maybe weren't that brilliant, but they really knew how to be good to people and how to attract clients and how to attract money. So it worked out very
So
well.
so I'm a little confused. What is Kestrel Ventures? Kestrel Management?
So so when I left Pell Rudman, I ultimately decided to start a venture firm, which is called Kestrel Venture
Okay.
Partners. I had two partners, and I remember I said I wasn't a good judge of character. Both of them flaked out. One of them did a side deal with the company we were looking at that we discovered after the fact, and that led to some hard conversations, and he resigned from the firm. But it left all the limited partners pissed off that we could let something like that happen. And then the other one, who was Egyptian, had a American wife, and he and his wife were getting divorced, and he decided to kidnap his children and go fly to Egypt where she couldn't reach them. So
Wow.
that disappointed my limited partners as well. So,
How
but
did
I
you how did you recover from all that?
well, I just worked. I didn't put any more money, newer money to work. I worked out the companies we had. We were lucky in that, one of the investments we had, which crotcheted the entrepreneur, but he never needed more money, which meant that I never got stuck, having to
Mhm.
support a company I couldn't afford to. And he ended up selling it for a good return. So I got done with that. And then by that time, I'd been asked to step in to run a company called PHT, which is medical information. And I declined to be the president and CEO, but said I'd be the executive chair and sort of run the company, but not have to deal with a lot of issues. And that was a great 6 years. And we took the company from 20 million of revenues and losing 40 to 120 million of revenues and making 40. And should have held on to the company, but the venture capitalists who owned it said this is good enough for us. And we sold it.
So did you maintain Kestrel, or did that
I
fade
just
away?
kept it.
And
I kept it as a nom de guerre. Yeah.
okay, and so then you kind of had a sequence of these operating uh, board jobs.
Right. Right.
Uh, um, and how did you get involved in Launchpad? You saw that on your resume,
It was in the early days of Launchpad, a friend of mine from the venture world, knew I was doing angel deals and said you should join these guys. Get a little, not so much for the capital, but just to have a bigger network. So I really joined it short term, but at the time, Launchpad, this is a group of people who do angel investing. It's very informal, had about 18 people. Now it's 100, 200 people and a staff of five, and the largest angel group in the Northeast.
yeah. And I also saw, oddly enough, I'm pretty good friends with Chris Gaffney, who started Great Hill Partners. I don't know how I even know him, but I know him before that even. And I was talking to him, and he said that you were uh, one of the absolute first investors. And this is a now massive private equity firm that's been very, very successful over, I don't know, 20 plus years now. How did you get involved in that?
Well, Chris Gaffney and the other three founders all came out of a firm called Media Communication Partners and David Kroll. And before that, they were all with
Right,
TA. Nobody
right.
at TA got along. So it broke into three companies, and one of them was Media Communications. And four of them broke away. And, I was socially friends with one of them and called him and said, I hear you started your own firm. And he goes, yeah. And I hear you've named it after our family's place in Marion. He goes, yeah, it was sort of a familiar name, but I couldn't place it. And so I said, look, it's okay with me. I'm going to invest with you guys, if you'll take me, and I want your swag. And so I was, I think, the first commitment, but it was Yale in this game of starting venture firms. In those days, guys, if you got Yale to invest, everybody else just followed along like cattle to slaughter.
Yeah, there's this legendary investor named David Swanson who ran the Yale endowment, who was really the first endowment manager to think outside the box and invest in alternative investments, meaning, private equity, venture capital, hedge funds, that kind of thing. And he had amazing returns. So everyone wanted to do what he did. Um, yeah, I just
Yeah.
remember it was kind of funny because I actually did talk to Chris this week in preparation to talk to you, and he was reminding me that, like, I remember seeing him on a plane with his pitch, like, physical pitch book, when he was just starting Great Hill. So I was like, he's like, I don't know how it's gonna go. It's going pretty well. So what do you think, like, was your the best? What's the best deal you ever invested in, or company you worked for?
Well, I said to John, just numerically, the best deal in terms of return was not a big investment in a company which made imaging machines for hospitals, CAT scan machines that are portable. You can move them from one operating room theater to another, which no one had ever been to do. And he had some smart engineers. Turned out he wasn't that likable a guy. He never followed any of our advice. And he was quite a greedy guy. But in the end, I would have sold the company for maybe a 5 or 10 times return. They were doing fine, but he just hung out and negotiated people, and ultimately he got a 50 times
Wow.
return. So that numerically is great. I don't know, it wasn't all that satisfying. I think more satisfying, I invested called Iora Healthcare, which was early on to thinking conceptually of taking care of people, not by billing them for their medical services, but by billing whoever's paying, their insurer, their employer, an amount per month, and then making sure they don't get sick, which meant putting a much bigger emphasis on primary care and a
Mm.
much emphasis on chronic care. Um, and it was called Iora, and a really, really great entrepreneur doctor. And he was having a hard time raising money. But he had it set up. I believed in him. So I and another angel with a lot more money than me said, okay, we'll back you for a single clinic. And so then I called Terry McGuire at Polaris, big venture capitalist, and said, Terry, you don't have to worry. You've been stalling him for Rushiko is his name. You've been stalling Rushiko for 6 months. Don't worry about it anymore. We're going to do it without you. And then within 30 seconds, he called Rushika and said, my secretary's fault. Someone screwed up. You were supposed to have a term sheet 2 weeks ago. Keep Stone out of it. I'm doing this deal. And I can give you a lot more money. And Rashid was good enough to say, hey, I'm not going to kick him out after he forced you to do something. And but that company really was a breakthrough in how to care for people called value-based medicine. It's now an acronym. And ultimately, unfortunately, it was bought by Amazon and they buried it. Basically took the top people and put them in other places. And so it's Amazon Health, but it's not, it's a shadow of its former size. So, but that was
Cool.
highly rewarding. And because I was very early and really made a big bet, it was also did well.
So I want to talk about your daughter a little bit. Uh, Jenny learned to row from your wife, is that correct?
Well, just like me, she began in dinghies and then rowed a little in camp. And just like me, she played lacrosse in high school until she didn't make the varsity. And so my wife was coaching at the Windsor School. Chevy was at the Windsor School. And my wife said to me, you've got to convince Chevy to row because she's tall. And she'd been out in the double a few times. She says, if I have her, we can win. So she switched to rowing in her junior year and they won the national championship in her junior and senior year for high school girls. So my wife was right about that. It was all she needed. She had three other good girls. And then she went on to Princeton and rode on a national championship crew there and rode on two gold medal under 23 boats. And then tried out for the 2008 Olympic team and didn't make it. And she was already in medical school and came back and said, Dad, you said I was good, but I'm really not that good. And I'm going to be a doctor. And I said, well, you've got a single. Why don't we just go out 3 or 4 times a week and have some fun and see if you can find your own rhythm in the boat rather than trying to imitate someone else's rhythm. And she ended up winning all the fall races and decided that she wanted to try for another Olympics. So then she asked my mentor and my coach, Harry Parker, if he would coach her. And he already, she didn't know this, but he'd already been diagnosed with cancer. And he said, nah, your father knows as much as I do. You might as well take him along for the ride. So that's how I ended up coaching her.
So that was prior to the 2012 Olympics.
Right. That was in 2009. And so she really wasn't any good at that point, but she got better. And
Wait,
and
time out. I want to go back to one thing. How did you let her go to Princeton? Like, come on,
oh, that was the right place for her to go.
really?
Princeton had the best coach, Lori Daphne.
Yeah.
And they also told a big fat lie, which Wesleyan probably tells. Not that it's probably true at Wesleyan, but Lori said to her correctly, if you go to Harvard, you can't row and be pre-med. They won't let you because of the labs. At Princeton, we don't have any labs in the afternoon.
Okay.
But in
Yeah.
fact,
Well,
we
I think I
went to
told you.
Princeton and had to take the really tough course, which is organic chemistry during the summer at Rutgers because it's too demanding to take that at Rome. No one does
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I say that in jest because I think I told you my sister also went to Princeton, was also a national champion. So like, you know, when my son now goes to Princeton for Brown and comes home with a Princeton shirt, it kind of feels good. I have to admit. So, um, but so what happened at the 2012 Olympics?
So Chevy was 14. Let's see now. She was 10th in the World Championships the year before, and so had to go through a qualifier to get to the Olympics because not everybody gets to send a crew. She did that, and then she had, for her, the best race of her life. She finished seventh, winning the B final, and beat three athletes she'd never beaten before, and that got her excited enough to think that maybe she should go for another. 4 years and try for a medal. And there was a very, still living, but he's no longer coaching, a great coach named Mike Spracklin, had coached the British team, briefly the US team, and then Canadians. He came up to me in 2011 and said, I've been watching your daughter and she'll be in the medals. And I'm going, no way, thinking he meant London. He goes, no, no, not London. She'll be in the medals in Rio. Just have her keep doing it. And so she was.
But we talked at lunch a couple weeks ago about when after she'd finished seventh, you kind of had to like do a reset, um, technically, and really make the decision to go after a medal.
Yes. Yeah,
And so,
that
what
was
was that all about?
so she went out 2012, then she went to med school for a couple of years, did training, but then in the 2014 World Championships, she finished 10th, I think. It wasn't very good. And we had a sit down and we said, hey, if we're going to do this, spend all the time and you're going to put off residency, we want to go for a medal. And so we have to change anything that we think will make us go faster. So that's when we did the reset. And we went to the Patriots, the New England Patriots, who at the time had the most sophisticated physiological training and testing program, and got ideas from them. Their nutritionist, who now does most of the NFL, it did some workup on Jevy, and we found out that she had a lot of arsenic in her blood, which is not unusual for someone from New England because the arsenic is in the water forever, and we used to pour it on our apple orchards. But arsenic prevents lactic acid from dissipating, so you're always feeling more tired, and you have to be. So we got rid of the arsenic in her blood. He said she was not eating red meat. He said, you got to eat red meat. The only way you get enough iron as a woman is by not the pills won't do it for you. Neither will the beans. You got to eat red meat, 6 ounces, 5 times a week. She became a beef fan again. And so we did a lot. We did a lot of change up, including change her style a bit, change the boat she was rowing, and all incremental. But by 2015, she went from 11th or 12th in the world to fourth, and she was right on the cusp of cracking into the top three.
So then 2016, she wins the silver medal, and
Yeah.
it's kind of a full circle. Like, how did that feel for you, having been boycotted out of your own Olympics, but to watch your daughter win the Olympic medal?
Well, I'd say London was a reward for me for missing Moscow because London was such a celebration of rowing and so fun. When we went to Rio, it was all about getting a medal. So there was no sort of, we weren't spending any time enjoying sights. And it was great. Made me so proud of her. I mean, she really did it. And you're in the single, you're doing it on your own, you know. The coach should get credit for commanding an eight or a full soccer team, but when it's a single, it's a lot of personal work. And she rode a tactically great race, and she did. We knew because of racing in Europe, we knew by May that if she changed around her racing style a little, she'd have a shot at the gold medal. She wasn't far off, second half off the gold, but that would be risky. She could also blow up and end up fourth or fifth. And she said, no way, I'm not taking any risks. I want a medal. Just get me. She just said, Dad, skip that gold stuff. Just get me on the podium.
Um, that's awesome. So we're kind of pushing the end of time here, but so just in general, so we have these freshman, sophomore athletes from Wesleyan who are interested in business, and obviously, kind of the crossover from being athletes to using all that discipline for in business. But what kind of general advice would you have for them as they kind of consider, um, their professional careers?
Yeah. So my advice, which was fairly unique when I was giving it to Harvard undergrads like 20 years ago, but now is pretty standard, is whatever you guys do when you leave, don't think that your first deal after college, your first step is hyper important. It's going to lead you the rest of your life. You're going to have many careers, probably in a number of industries before you're done. Tom's a good example of that. I've done coaching. I was a professional coach, and then I was a lawyer, then law school, and a lawyer, then entrepreneur, then healthcare, and back to coaching. You, you know, I wouldn't get wrapped up in that first step. Just make sure whatever you do, is going to be fun and it's going to get you some knowledge of people and things to do next. And I have a friend, college friend, Paul Fettigan. He was captain of our cross country ski team in the era, and he was clueless what he was going to do after college. And on graduation day, a father of a friend of his said, "Hey, Paul, I need someone in my Hong Kong office to handle shipping." This guy made a lot of shoes. And so Paul went off to Hong Kong, but it gave him enough experience so he could then write a letter and get into Harvard Business School, which landed him into the private equity world, and he's had a very successful career. So you really don't know where things are going to take you. And so, what you want to do is just figure out what the best opportunities are now and not get hung up too much, in what that is.
Amen. I'm a perfect example of that. I told these guys my first 5 years of postgraduate was a period of dereliction. So, and it worked out okay. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say the first job is not a train to your future. It's just like rock climbing, where you're looking up at the face and you're saying, I'm going to take that step. Now I'm going to move over here and take this step, and you move your way up the mountain, but you do it thoughtfully, and you can't really tell where you're going to end up.
all right. So we're gonna let the dogs out and go to questions. I'm gonna call on people until somebody raises their hand.
Yeah. So good question. And this is what you got to put in your cover letter. I was saying to John that, as you're writing for jobs, the resume is all facts. The cover letter is sort of how I fit to whoever you're writing. And as an athlete in a team sport, you know how to be a teammate. You know how to work hard. You know how to work with others. And there's nothing more essential. Whether you're in any modern business, law, medicine, business, you're going to be working with a cohort of people and helping them. And so you want to say, I know how to do this. I've lived this. I've been on a successful team, you know, and that's by far that's the most important attribute. So I would say that, Vlad, that in the case of my daughter's changes, we had both agreed that, we should do everything we can to make the boat faster. And good science would be you make one change, see if it works, and make another. But we didn't have time to do all that. Like nutritional changes take 3 months to work in. So it was just really going for broke, knowing that, pretty confident that it wouldn't be worse, but it could be better. And the breakthrough came maybe 8 months after you started making all these changes. You went out in the water one day at a different boat, and all of a sudden was noticeably faster. And we just knew at that point that the changes had worked. And she knew it more than me because we went to Europe to race. And so these regattas always have heats and then quarters, semifinals, and then finals. And I think in the quarterfinals, she's up against a woman who'd beaten her a couple of times, the Chinese woman. And I said, it's okay if Ching Li goes by you because we'll have the finals to try to catch up. And she just got really pissed off. She went out and crushed Ching Li, and then came to the dock and said, "You're fired. You're the shittiest coach I've ever had. You didn't think I could beat her." She just threw down her oars and walked away. And one of the other coaches in the U.S. team said, "Wow, I don't know what you did, but you made her fast." So anyway,
That's funny. All right, two. I have two more questions, and we're done. What's your favorite movie?
Gettysburg. I'm a history buff, and it's it's an incredible time when the biggest armies ever assembled in the world went after each other for 3 days, not for money or religion, but for a concept. And people without much experience were thrown into incredible positions of responsibility. So go watch the movie, and you think about General Buford who was an Indian chaser in the West before the war, and he could see at the start of the battle, as it started forming, that if he couldn't hold the hill, the Union armies, and maybe the Union was done for. And it's a great scene. Great movie.
Yeah, it's a great book too. I should put that on their list. Killer Angels is amazing. Um, so that's a good thought. Okay, so if you want to leave these gentlemen with one word, what would the word be?
Optimism. When I was maybe 10 or 15 years in my career, I sort of looked around and said, and I had these Harvard classmates who'd already done very well, other people I knew doing well, others not so well. And I was trying to figure out what, because it wasn't due to smarts, it was social skills, saying what made them more successful. And in each case, they're just optimistic people, cheerful people, believing if you try to set something done, you can get it done. So just be upbeat. Don't, whatever you're doing and work on it right now while you're on your teams. You know, brush away the bad, accept the good, and make all the friends you can. Don't make any enemies. It's the way to go.
Well, that's it, man. Thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate you spending time with us and spending time with some of the students today. It was awesome. Really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch soon.
A lot of fun. Okay. Good luck,
All right,
guys.
talk to you later.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.